Amazing CEO exposes airline's shocking discrimination. One call transforms justice for thousands. Jessica Lawson sat in her cramped Chicago office, surrounded by marketing pitches and looming deadlines. Her heart raced as she clicked open an internal report marked confidential. The numbers and percentages blurred, but what crystallized in her mind shattered her perception of the multinational airline she thought she knew. The data revealed a sordid tale of systemic discrimination against entry-level employees, a group already reeling under financial pressure. Their struggles, hidden beneath the shiny veneer of corporate values, echoed her own. Single motherhood, her mother's escalating medical bills, the impossibility of making ends meet. It was a bitter pill to swallow, as unsettling as the cold coffee staining her desk. The weight of the report pressed down on her chest. Her mentor's voice echoed in her mind, a mantra of integrity ringing loud. You have to stand for what's right. But the internal war was fierce. With each breath, her doubts lingered like shadows. To expose the truth would be to confront a system built on hierarchy and privilege. But would that risk everything she had worked for? The instability loomed large, threatening to engulf her as she imagined her sons, too young to shoulder the burdens she bore, watching their mother struggle, their future hanging in the balance. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jessica's mind was a tumultuous map of contradictions. Her breath quickened, and muscle tension coiled through her body as the inevitable clash between morality and security played out. The report lay before her like a lit fuse, and she trembled at the thought of picking up the phone to call a journalist renowned for exposing corporate corruption. Did she have the strength to step into the line of fire? What would it mean for her job? The firing squad of judgment from her colleagues echoed ominously. Yet the pang of injustice for those employees, each faceless number representing a life in turmoil, pushed her toward a precipice. Every tick of the clock was a reminder of her dwindling time, each second amplifying the pressure. Her mother's medical bills loomed larger than the southwest sky, and with each day, the dream of a stable, comfortable life for her children dimmed further. Could she risk their future? But then again, was it right to remain silent? Internal conflict felt like a vice clenching tighter. Her heart thudded against her ribcage, each beat punctuating the uncertainty. As she closed her eyes, envisioning the forthcoming press conference, nausea washed over her. She would stand in front of faces filled with skepticism, with authority figures who believed in their entitlement. Would she appear weak? A coward? The thought struck her like a punch. This was no longer just a job to her. It was a fight for fairness, a chance to redefine justice. She'd seen the damage complacency had caused. She would not become another cog in a machine that crushed the hopeful. Yet doubt lingered like an unwanted ghost. What if she faced backlash? What if those she thought might support her turned against her, sabotaging everything she believed in? The tension in her gut grew, a tightening spiral preparing to unleash chaos. Just when she thought she found clarity, the ground beneath her felt tenuous. Would she break under the pressure or find the power within herself to rise up? Jessica could sense the chasm yawning wider, thirsting for her decision, a decision that bore the weight of countless lives, one moment holding her in its grip. The morning sun streamed through the office window, illuminating the chaos of papers strewn across Jessica's desk. With every passing second, the reality of her dilemma loomed larger, wrapping around her thoughts like a thick fog. She fought the urge to bury her head in her hands, to let the heaviness of the report wash over her like an inescapable tide. Instead, she reached for her phone, her fingers hovering above the screen, heart thumping vehemently. Jessica inhaled deeply, wrestling with the surge of emotions threatening to drown her resolve. Each employee represented in that report was more than just a statistic. They were individuals with hopes and dreams, people who needed someone to fight for them. That thought propelled her hand forward, and she opened her contacts. The journalist's name shimmered on the screen like a beacon of hope, but also a siren of impending doom. What did it mean to her integrity to speak out? A fierce battle raged within, one she couldn't ignore any longer. The whispers of her mentor danced in her thoughts, teasing her into recognition. Integrity isn't just a choice, it's a way of life. This reminded her of the values she had held since her first promotion, values she had promised herself to protect. The juxtaposition between professional ambition and personal ethics began to crystallize in vivid detail. But the stakes were high. Could she really afford to place her career at risk? The image of her mother lying in the hospital bed, frail and vulnerable, sent a shiver through her spine. The weight of her duty as a caregiver collided with her professional aspirations, and she felt the ground beneath her shift uncontrollably. A decision was brewing, but it demanded clarity in a storm of uncertainty. As she opted instead for the route of careful planning, she realized her next steps must be calculated. She opened her laptop and began drafting a list. What resources could she tap into? What allies could be counted on? Cornering herself inside her barriers wouldn't do. She needed to form her strategy. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, constructing a plan that included a meeting with her trusted colleagues, those who had stood by her during difficult times. The phone felt heavy but necessary as she scrolled through her contacts. The thought of engaging them in this tidal wave of moral upheaval ignited her courage. Who could she trust? Names raced through her mind, discerning friends from potential foes. Jessica knew she had to tread carefully. The corporate world was riddled with landmines ready to explode at the slightest misstep. In the moments that followed, her resolve solidified. She picked up the phone, dialing her closest ally, a colleague renowned for integrity exemplified over years within the company. As the line rang, Jessica felt a shift. The tension in her body began unraveling, replaced by a flicker of determination. "Hey, can we meet? It's urgent," she said firmly as soon as the voice answered, her heart steadying with conviction. Once they settled to meet in a nearby cafe, Jessica would be ready to voice her concerns and discuss the troubling report together. She couldn't bear the thought of standing alone. Support was essential if her voice were to lead to meaningful change. Just as she hung up, one thought pulsated continuously in her mind. The time had come to face the truth, but would she find the strength within to guide others toward justice? Or would she become yet another silent witness to the injustice? With her resolve becoming clearer, she realized she had unwittingly crossed a threshold. She was not just an employee anymore. She was a catalyst in the making. As anticipation continued to brew, the question lingered. Would the rallying force within her shatter the constraints of fear, pushing her toward an unexpected confrontation? The cafe bustled with the hum of conversation, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air as Jessica sat at a corner table, her heart racing against the ticking clock. She was early, a combination of excitement and anxiety swirling within her. The meeting with her ally wasn't just another chat, it felt like a crucial turning point. Jessica glanced at her phone, confirming the time. Caleb was always punctual. She reminded herself how instrumental he had been when she first joined the company, his integrity serving as a formidable benchmark for her own. As she sipped her coffee, a shiver of self-doubt ran through her. Was she really ready for this? The stakes were unfathomable. The very integrity she fiercely believed in was now poised on the edge of a precipice. Moments later, she spotted Caleb entering the cafe. He greeted her with an easy smile, a beacon of calm that instantly reassured her. They exchanged pleasantries, but Jessica felt the weight of the report pressing heavily on her chest. How could she articulate the disarray she had discovered? "Thanks for coming on short notice," she said, attempting to mask the tremor in her voice. "Of course. You sounded serious," Caleb replied, his brow furrowing slightly. His intuition had always been sharp, and Jessica knew he sensed the gravity of the situation. They settled into a deeper conversation away from the din, and with each shared detail she felt a shift. The way she articulated the facts, focusing on the humans behind the data, spurred a new wave of clarity. "It's not just numbers, Caleb," she urged. "These are real lives at risk. If I stay silent, I'm complicit." Caleb nodded, his expression unreadable as he weighed her words. But speaking out could lead to serious backlash. "Are you prepared for that?" His question pierced through her resolve, leaving her momentarily quiet. What was her plan if everything went wrong? Yet as she delved deeper into what she felt, the whispers of the employees' frustrations, their muted fears, she grappled with the undeniable truth. If she didn't act, how could she face herself or her mother? "I need to strategize," she said, her tone stealing with conviction. "I'm not just going to dive in blindly. I've been mapping out allies, potential outcomes." "Then let's explore those together," he replied, leaning forward with interest. "Do you think an article could shed light even if you remain anonymous?" Jessica mulled over the idea, the balance of anonymity laced with exposure suddenly appealing. If she could reveal the truth without directly putting herself in the line of fire, it was a balancing act she could learn to navigate, but the underlying fear of being unmasked lingered. Caleb continued to dig deeper, posing questions that pressed against her resolve. "What if this turns against you, Jess? This industry isn't easy when you wave a flag." The challenge ignited a flicker of defiance within her. "Maybe it's time someone dared to wave that flag," she shot back, surprising even herself with her fervor. Caleb studied her for a moment, as if gauging her commitment. "Then how about we write a draft together? You need clarity before reaching out." The inkling of excitement surged again. Collaborating with Caleb might just refine her thoughts and sharpen her strategy into something truly actionable. "Let's do it," she said, the words tumbling out. Within that crowded cafe, amidst the lingering aroma of coffee and chatter, a spark ignited. They dove into brainstorming, their exchange morphing into a creative synergy. As ideas flew back and forth, Jessica's fears began to morph into a palpable hope. But as they delved deeper into the logistics, the unresolved question loomed large. What if the exposure didn't lead to justice but a reckoning? What would happen if the news spiraled out of control? Jessica's heart thumped as another daunting thought surfaced. Was she equipped to handle the consequences of what lay ahead? With each word exchanged, uncertainty painted her resolve with brighter colors, tugging her toward the precipice of an unknown future. Would the path she chose light the way for justice, or would it encase her in shadows she could not escape? The moment approached when her voice would either echo through the walls of the corporation or dissolve into obscurity. A choice loomed: to let the ink of the truth spill freely, or to keep it bottled inside where it could fester and rot. "Let's solidify our plan," she said, pushing away those haunting thoughts, but her eyes caught a reflection of her own steely gaze. Part of her was already established in a role much larger than herself. Would she truly embrace her identity as a whistleblower, or would she jump back into silence when it mattered most? Just then, her phone buzzed. A message flashed on the screen. "Urgent meeting requested by upper management." What could this foretell? The weight of her choices pressed down on her anew, sending ripples of tension through her resolve. The meeting was scheduled for the following morning, a mere 24 hours from now. Jessica stared at her phone, its vibrancy dulling against her growing unease. Upper management rarely summoned her for anything benign. In the corporate world, the knife edge of opportunity often glinted alongside the shadows of risk. Suddenly, her strategy regarding the report and gathering evidence surged forward in her mind, colliding with the reality of what might be coming. What if she were called in to quell the storm before it began? What if they wanted to silence her, preemptively working to undermine any momentum she had built with Caleb? In the coffee-scented haven of the cafe, those thoughts had propelled her forward. But now, they encased her in doubt. She glanced across the table. Caleb's brow was furrowed, his eyes glued to the notes they had jotted down together. This was no longer a mere brainstorming session. Their ideas had taken shape, and she could feel the weight of the truth bearing down on her conscience. That visceral anger and determination had sparked a flame, but anxiety threatened to snuff it out. "What do you think they want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would shatter the tenuous composure she had built. Caleb looked up, his expression turning serious. "I suspect they might be catching wind of something. It's not uncommon for those in power to preemptively strike at dissent. You need to be prepared for any angle they may approach." His pragmatic assessment was a lifeline. "Prepared how?" she pressed, her heart racing as the prospect crystallized. The idea of facing her superiors began to terrify her. "Well, it might be wise to consider how you frame your narrative. They know you're not one to back down, so they may come ready to discredit or intimidate. You'll need both your data and the personal stakes that fuel your passions for justice." Jessica took a deep breath, grounding herself in his words. She could prepare a narrative that showcased not just cold, hard facts, but also the emotional truths behind those numbers and the employees they affected. Each story carried weight. Each face behind the data begged for acknowledgement. Yet, would her voice carry authentically if faced with extreme corporate pressure? The cafe bustled around them, a stark contrast to the turmoil inside her. What would it feel like to have those managers confront her, to be the focus of their dismissive glares, to entertain their attempts to sway her resolve? They would wield their power like a blade, and she needed to counteract that. The conversation shifted subtly as they resumed brainstorming. Caleb suggested roles. Jessica would be the spokesperson of accountability, while he would act as a supportive co-writer. He emphasized that she'd need to invoke a sense of urgency in her writing. If your voice can resonate with shared anxieties, they may find it harder to attack you. Jessica nodded, empowerment blooming among her fears. Perhaps she could articulate a position so clear and so compelling that it would create an impenetrable shield against the inevitable backlash. Yet questions still gnawed at her. What if clarity was met not just with skepticism, but retaliation? Her eyes wandered to a couple at a nearby table, engrossed in a heated discussion. Their faces betrayed deep concerns, reminding her of the employees she aimed to protect. Each day they walked that precarious line between corporate loyalty and disenfranchisement. How many similar stories were silenced beneath the weight of fear? "Caleb," she said, urgency sharpening her voice, "what if we turn this meeting to our advantage? What if I walk in prepared not only to respond, but to expose their bluff?" Caleb's expression shifted to one of intrigue. "Are you suggesting you go in armed with what you've learned, turn their approach into a platform?" "Why not?" she replied, excitement slicing through her doubt. "If they want to threaten me, I can challenge the narrative, flip the script, show them I know what I'm talking about." He nodded slowly, the wheels visibly turning in his mind. "That might just work, but you'll have to be ready for the worst if they don't back down." "Then I won't either," she vowed, the embers of her resolve sparking into an inferno. As they discussed tactics, Jessica felt the tide shifting. No longer merely a whistleblower, she envisioned herself as a catalyst for change, empowered and steadfast. She was ready to step into the uncertainty of the storm. But as she closed her notebook, a foreboding tension gripped her. The stakes were higher than ever. Would she emerge as a voice for truth, or was there an unseen trap embedded in the very walls of the corporation she had served? The next day would unveil the extent of her conviction, but a deeper question echoed in her mind. Would she wield her truth as a weapon, or would the corporation's facade fracture her resolve? The clock ticked down, and the weight of the impending confrontation settled on her shoulders like a cloak. The following morning, the daylight filtering through the blinds showcased dust motes suspended in the air, a reminder of the work still to be done. Jessica's heart raced as she prepared to step into the corporate labyrinth that carried whispers of power and risk. The weight of her mission pressed down on her like lead, yet with every heartbeat, her resolve solidified. In the stark confines of the glass-walled conference room, the air felt electric, charged with unspoken tension. Jessica could see the reflection of her colleagues in the panes, their expressions masking the undercurrent of anticipation. Each pair of eyes told a story of loyalty, ambition, and perhaps fear. The board members, sat at the head of the table, looked as imposing as statues, each entrenched in their own agenda. As Jessica entered the room, her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of purpose. She had prepared meticulously, integrating Caleb's suggestions into her narrative. If they intended to question her credibility, she would counter with facts, flushed with emotion and personal stakes. "Thank you for joining us today," the CEO's voice boomed, slicing through her thoughts. She felt an urge to take control of the conversation, to assert that her voice was not merely an echo in this corporate hall, but a powerful narrative of truth and accountability. "Jessica," the CEO leaned forward, curiosity mingling with condescension, "you've been vocal about your findings. We thought it would be beneficial for you to clarify your stance to the entire board." His tone dripped with skepticism, a calculated attempt to unsettle her. This was it. The depth of her quiet determination surged within her. "I believe," she began, projecting strength in her voice despite the knots twisting in her stomach, "that numbers alone don't tell the full story. Behind every data point, there are employees, real people whose experiences are shaped by the policies we implement." As she spoke, Jessica discarded the fear of becoming a target. She wielded her narrative as a sharp tool, dissecting the findings she had compiled, but weaving in the stories of those who felt stifled beneath the corporation's ambitions. The CEO shifted in his seat, discomfort flickering across his face as she continued. "And these stories can no longer be silenced. We've ignored the inequities for too long, discrimination based on identity or circumstance that edges out potential and limits growth. It's high time we hold ourselves accountable for our part in this." The murmurs around the room structured a chorus of surprise and contemplation. She felt a surge of exhilaration. For once, the power of her voice felt tangible, like a ripple that could create waves of change. As she finished outlining her position, the reserved executives exchanged guarded glances. Her heart raced with a cocktail of anticipation and dread, their faces unreadable. Would they push back or validate her resolve? A sharp voice broke through the stillness of the moment. "This is all well and good, but emotion won't save you here. We need tangible solutions, not stories of victimization," a senior executive retorted, determination wrapping around his words like barbed wire. Jessica's throat tightened, but she fought to maintain her composure. This was the pushback she anticipated, a test of her resilience. "I agree that we need solutions, actionable steps, but those can only come from understanding the breadth and depth of the issues we face. Evidence, while vital, often lacks the human element that drives change." Her confidence fueled a shift in the room. "I propose we start an internal review process. Let's establish a committee focused on the inclusion of voices often left out of this dialogue. Bringing empathy into the metrics can create actionable insights. The CEO seemed taken aback by her proactive approach. She could see the gears shifting in his mind, the corporate engines weighing the cost of ignoring the growing demand for change. That might require more resources than we have. His hesitance hung in the air, but Jessica detected a flicker of acknowledgement. As they continued to discuss her proposal, Jessica evolved in the space. It was more than just a meeting. It was a confrontation, a testing ground for her potential and convictions. She felt her influence beginning to crystallize, transforming fear into a formidable drive to effect change. But then a stark realization hit her. Would they merely placate her with empty promises, or were they genuinely willing to reconsider their direction? As the discussion drew to a close, a sense of unease washed over her. The consequences of her boldness loomed large, each decision carrying the potential for retaliation. She wondered, had she crossed a boundary that may not be easily undone? Jessica had unveiled a deeper calling within herself. The storm she had feared earlier had morphed into a beacon of opportunity. Yet as the meeting adjourned and her colleagues began to depart, one figure remained. Caleb stood at the door, his eyes reflecting both admiration and concern. The stakes were rising, and she sensed the tides shifting once more. Would her newfound voice empower or isolate her in a swarm of corporate peril? The next confrontation was brewing, and Jessica braced herself for what was to come. Jessica stepped out of the conference room, still riding the adrenaline of her confrontation with the board. The air outside felt different, heavier yet charged with possibility. She could hear the murmur of conversations echoing down the corridor, each voice blending into a tapestry of anxiety and ambition. It was both exhilarating and suffocating. The same dynamics she had faced in that room now rippling outward, threatening to engulf her. Caleb fell into step beside her, his expression a mixture of pride and concern. "You were incredible in there," he said, his voice low enough to keep it between them. "But are you ready for the fallout? Not everyone will support this." Jessica nodded, acknowledging his concern, yet feeling a flicker of defiance ignite within her. "I'm ready for whatever comes next. Change is never without its costs," she replied. Yet even as she spoke, she felt the swell of doubt at the edges of her resolve. Was she prepared for the potential backlash from the executives who thrived in the shadows of complacency? "You need allies," Caleb continued, his tone turning serious. "The board isn't the only one who's been resistant to change. You know others feel the same way, but many are too afraid to speak up." The truth of his words resonated deeply. She thought back to the colleagues who had approached her cautiously, confiding their own frustrations but holding back from taking a stand. In those moments, she had felt a kinship with them, a shared burden of unvoiced concerns, breeding discontent among the ranks. "Perhaps they can be the heart of this initiative," Jessica mused, a plan coalescing in her mind. Empowering those voices might not only lend credibility to her cause, but also create a united front that could not be easily dismissed. "Start with a session," Caleb suggested, a gleam of inspiration lighting his eyes. "A safe space for people to air their concerns. You could use your platform to unify their experiences." This idea ignited something within her, fueling not just her mission, but a profound understanding of her potential to lead. By providing colleagues with the opportunity to express their struggles, she could transform individual discomfort into collective power. "Let's set up that session," she affirmed, determination flowing through her veins. Each decision felt like stepping onto a new path, one she had once hesitated to traverse. "Just be careful, Jess," he warned. "Challenging the status quo has its costs. Those in power don't react well to threats, perceived or otherwise." His warning hung heavily in the air, but she felt her tenacity only strengthen. Sure, she had made herself a target, but hadn't she always been one? This time the focus was sharper and the stakes were higher. As days turned into weeks, Jessica worked tirelessly to organize the meeting. She dedicated herself to crafting an environment with thoughtful ground rules, creating an atmosphere stripped of judgment. She reached out to colleagues via discreet emails, inviting them to share and listen. The day of the session arrived with an air of anticipation mixed with dread. Would they engage, or would the silence weigh heavily as it had in past years? Faces she recognized but rarely interacted with shuffled into the room, a mix of nervous energy and guarded hope filling the space. Jessica felt her heart pounding as she stood at the front, ready to open the forum. Her courage thrummed in unison with the quiet flickers of determination she detected around the room. She initiated the discussion, setting the tone with her own vulnerability, sharing her journey and the fears that had driven her to confront the board. One by one, hands began to rise, voicing concerns, sharing stories that echoed the struggle she had laid bare. The collective experiences crystallized into a tapestry of shared frustration, challenging both the individual and systemic injustices that had long been ignored. Yet, amid the growing dialogue, she felt the weight of an impending storm. The executives had been monitoring this spontaneous activism closely. She whispered to Caleb as he sat nearby, "Do you think they'll retaliate?" His brows furrowed, foreboding etched in his expression. "They will, and when they do, we need to be ready. What you lead can't just be words. It has to be backed by action and solidarity." As the session closed, the voices around her rang with a newfound urgency, exposing hidden talents and inexhaustible strength. The ache of their stories was a call to arms, not only for change within the company but to also challenge the world outside as well. Jessica realized the depths of the struggle ahead. If her voice had the power to inspire action, it also painted a target on her back. Would she and her colleagues be strong enough to face whatever repercussions were unleashed upon them? Would this gathering morph into a catalyst for transformation, or a distant memory buried beneath the weight of corporate indifference? As she stepped into the bright corridor, the echo of her colleagues' testimonies resonating in her mind, she felt the ground shifting beneath her. The hourglass she had unconsciously turned began to empty, each grain representing not only time, but the very opportunity to forge a new path in their corporate microcosm. Here she stood at the precipice of change, only to wonder what decisions would follow. Would sharing these truths be the foundation of a lasting movement, or merely an invitation to declare war with those too entrenched in tradition? The next struggle loomed ahead, and Jessica had to summon every ounce of courage she possessed. The days following the session felt like walking a tightrope. Jessica navigated the office with a heightened awareness, each interaction tinged with a subtle tension. Colleagues greeted her with newfound camaraderie, yet refrained from direct engagement. Jessica felt a thrill at being a catalyst, but as the shadow of the executives loomed larger, anxiety constricted around her purpose. She dedicated the evenings to strategizing. What if the board retaliated in ways she couldn't foresee? Every scenario played out in her mind. Whispered warnings, discrediting campaigns, or even a forced resignation. Yet, amidst this turmoil, the murmur of support rose steadily, building a fortitude she hadn't anticipated. Colleagues began to share their thoughts through encrypted messages, voicing their endorsements and lending their voices to her cause. Jessica couldn't ignore their courage, even if her own doubts crept in relentlessly. One afternoon, she discovered an unexpected ally in Sarah, a mid-level manager whom she had scarcely spoken to before. Sarah cornered her by the break room, her face flushed with urgency. "I've been following what you did with the meeting. It was brave, bold. I've been feeling this way for ages," she said, her voice cracking under the weight of unexpressed frustrations. Jessica's heart raced at Sarah's words. This was exactly the reassurance she needed. "We can do this together," Jessica responded, sincerity infusing her tone. They exchanged ideas about organizing smaller groups within departments to address specific grievances, a top-down approach to creating structure for the broader change they envisioned. As the week unfolded, Jessica found herself pinpointing allies across different teams, gathering momentum. In those private conversations, she unearthed shared experiences and dissatisfaction, and their collective resolve solidified into a movement of subtle rebellion. Yet she was acutely aware of the fine line they were walking. The executives were undoubtedly monitoring their every move. There were no guarantees that their efforts wouldn't attract unyielding scrutiny. On the following Monday, it came, an email from the board. Jessica's heart plummeted as she read through the meticulously crafted lines. An emergency meeting had been scheduled for the middle of the week to discuss a comprehensive review of departmental functions. She sensed the implication beneath the surface, a dusting off of old policies, or worse, a potential crackdown on the very discussions her colleagues were beginning to engage in. Fear coiled tightly around her thoughts. Was this meant to stifle her efforts? Did they want to instill a culture of silence once again? The thought was infuriating, but it sparked something deeper within her, a need to not only respond but to escalate. This could be the moment to turn the executive's attempts at intimidation into a rallying cry. That evening, she held a dinner at her apartment for a select few who had shown unwavering support. "They think we'll back down," Jessica said, her voice steady as she mapped out her plan on a whiteboard. "But we cannot let fear dictate our actions. We need to confront them, expose the cracks in their facade." A few eyes widened, questioning her audacity, but Sarah and a couple of others nodded firmly. "What do you propose?" Sarah asked, her determination resonating with Jessica's own. Jessica pressed her palms together and leaned forward, unshakable resolve surging within her. "I propose we gather statements from all who attended the session. We document experiences and outline a formal response. This isn't just about us anymore. It's about transparency. It's about accountability." As the conversation flowed, her plans crystallized further, each suggestion and insight from her colleagues adding layers of depth to her mission. With every passing moment, a chilling clarity emerged. This was her standalone challenge, requiring unwavering conviction, and she would face the executives head-on. Yet as the evening wore on, an uneasy thought nagged at her. What if this escalation drew the kind of backlash she feared? What if being visible only led to greater isolation? She retired to her room late that night, exhaustion washing over her, but her mind twisted and turned. The stakes kept climbing. What if she lost everything she had fought for? But then again, hadn't she already lost, in silence? With that thought resonating in her mind, she resolved to confront the board with a courageous heart. She steeled herself for the battle ahead, aware that her next move would require not only her voice, but the strength of everyone who rallied behind her. The morning of the meeting arrived, and as she entered the conference room, she sensed the charged atmosphere that awaited her. Would her resolve hold firm under scrutiny, or would the push for change reveal cracks in their fragile unity? The moment for confrontation was imminent, and her heart pounded in anticipation of what lay ahead. The conference room exuded an air thick with unspoken challenges. Jessica took a deep breath, her palms clammy against the cool surface of the table. The executives filed in, their expressions impassive, masks concealing intentions that could sway from disapproval to hostility in an instant. Each step they took resonated like thunder in her mind, amplifying doubts she'd tried to suppress in the lead-up to this moment. The meeting began with the board chair, a stoic figure with an icy demeanor, laying out the agenda. Jessica's heart raced faster as she prepared for what lay ahead. Her allies, seated in various corners of the room, shifted anxiously, their eyes reflecting the hope she desperately sought to embody. The energy around her was akin to a live wire, crackling with tension and anticipation. As the chair spoke of the company's current environment of feedback, Jessica sensed a trap laced through the rhetoric. Words like concern, re-evaluation, and improvement appeared tailored to maintain the status quo while feigning openness. A deep resolve rose within her. This was her moment to unveil the truths hidden beneath professional pretenses. "Thank you for the opportunity to address the board today," she began, her voice cutting through the murmur of discontent that flickered among the executives. With each word, she felt the surge of courage grounding her. "I stand here representing not just the voices of disgruntled employees, but those who crave accountability and transparency within our corporate structure." The board's expressions turned guarded, a stony facade blending uncertainty with indignation. She knew she was crossing an invisible line. She could feel the weight of scrutiny pressing down on her every word, yet the power in her conviction demanded to be expressed. "After the last meeting, I received a flurry of support from colleagues across departments. We owe it to them to create a culture that fosters open dialogues." She paused, gauging the room. Eyes narrowed, fists clenched. The executives had not anticipated this, a beacon of resistance glowing against their authoritative clutch. Jessica harnessed their skepticism, transforming it into fuel. The documented experiences reveal patterns of marginalization and inequality, issues that cannot be swept under the rug in the name of corporate success. Gasps and whispers ricocheted through the room. Shockwaves trembled at the edges of her words. For a fleeting moment, exhilaration surged. Perhaps this was the internal shift she had hoped to ignite. But as the board members exchanged rapid glances, that fleeting thrill transformed into a sharp pang of fear. "Jessica," interrupted the operations executive, his voice deep and commanding, "these are serious accusations. Do you intend to disrupt the very fabric of our organizational integrity with unverified claims?" His tone dripped with condescension, aiming to dismantle her newfound confidence. The question hung eerily in the air, a challenge steeped in a subtle threat. Doubt threatened to seep in like ink on blotting paper, but she fought it back. This, she realized, was a fundamental test of her values. Was she willing to risk her position and credibility for the sake of others, to stand firm for the transparency she craved? With newfound clarity, Jessica responded, "No, I am not here to disrupt. I am here to rebuild, to demand accountability for the livelihood of my colleagues and the integrity of this organization. Anyone who believes in the values our company claims to uphold should join in this conversation rather than silence it." Her colleagues exchanged glances, a flicker of unity igniting. The chamber air thickened with tension, and just as momentum seemed poised to shift, the chair interjected sharply, "We will not entertain unfounded claims or allow ourselves to be drawn into chaos." In that moment, the stakes crystallized painfully. Jessica realized where she stood, not just in the conference room, but within herself. A split-second decision broke through her paralyzing uncertainty. She could turn back and abandon this quest, easing the tightness in her chest. Yet the thought of retreat ignited a fire within her. This wasn't just a meeting. This was her declaration of self-worth, demanding authenticity that reverberated beyond the boardroom walls. As the meeting continued, Jessica's mind raced. She had ignited a spark, but was it enough? Would the fear of reprisal extinguish her voice? Yet another dilemma clawed at her. If she persevered, would she risk alienation from those she had rallied alongside? The confrontation had begun, and the reactions were far from settled. What would happen when her allies were forced to choose between loyalty and caution? With resolute determination, she braced herself for the inevitable fallout, knowing that the moment of truth was closer than ever. Would her gamble pay off, or would the board shrink her dreams under the weight of conformity? As the conversation pressed on, she wondered how far she was willing to go for the truth and who she might lose along the way. With the chair's dismissal still echoing in the room, Jessica's heartbeat surged, thundering in her ears as the tension hung thick. The atmosphere had shifted, her emotional barricade crumbling under the weight of uncertainty. Each executive, for a fleeting moment, had looked at her not just as opposition, but as a threat to their carefully constructed universe. She clung to that recognition like a lifeline, channeling the adrenaline into clarity. The discussion continued, but the voices around her became a cacophony, her focus narrowing on the operations executive, who appeared agitated, tapping his pen against the table in a rhythmic, almost hypnotic manner. It was a reminder that this battle was more than just her fight. It encapsulated the struggles faced by countless others, their lives overshadowed by the corporate machine. "I hear what you're saying, Jessica," began another executive, a woman with piercing green eyes who had remained silent until now. She leaned forward, a calculated move that suggested she recognized both the gravity of Jessica's message and the need to regain control. "But don't you think this kind of divisive rhetoric risks damaging our reputation and morale? We have to think about how our decisions affect the broader community." Community. That word once felt like a shield, but now it sent daggers of doubt through her resolve. Jessica's thoughts wrestled with the instincts that urged her to play it safe, to smooth over rough edges rather than confront them head-on. But sacrificing her voice for superficial peace, that was a step backward. "Respectfully, I believe silence harms us more. Our community needs to know they have a voice that counts," Jessica responded, her tone sharpening as she paced the ground she had claimed. "We need to stop treating grievances as obstacles. They are opportunities for growth." As she spoke, Jessica could feel the shift in her own narrative. The realization settled in that her fear was an abstract, an illusion crafted by those in power. If she didn't shake free of its shackles, she would never foster the transformation she sought. The mental alchemy triggered a rush of empowerment. This was her crucible moment. Data and facts surrounding her assertions were no longer just ammunition. They were her allies. A palpable pause glided across the room. Her colleagues were shocked, waiting, uncertain if this was boldness or reckless abandon. But deep down, she felt the tide beginning to shift. Their allegiance was rattled. Dawning shadows of solidarity began to flicker. Would they dare support her battle, or would they lean into the comfort of conformity? The chair's expression hardened, and he cleared his throat, annoyance brewing. Jessica could almost sense a strategic calculation in his demeanor as he contemplated the implications of her stance. "While I appreciate your passion, we must find a solution that doesn't create chaos, Jessica. We can work on reform, but through established channels without accusations." She met his gaze, unyielding. Each silent heartbeat felt like a countdown to an inevitable confrontation. Now was not the time for retreat. "Then let's establish those channels, right from this moment. My colleagues deserve to feel safe voicing their experiences. If we continue to pretend these problems don't exist, we are undermining the very foundation we claim to uphold." A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience. Fear and courage swirled within, battling for dominance. Jessica felt exposed, yet a strange sense of calm engulfed her as she realized she had ventured beyond mere advocacy. She was now an architect of change. Still, she knew the repercussions would not be merely professional. They would seep into every corner of her life. As the executives' poker faces shifted to reflections of uncertainty, anger, and grudging respect, a flicker of hope ignited inside her. Would they consider a compromise, or had her declaration irrevocably altered the landscape? In that precarious moment, she resolved to embrace the unknown. Whatever it took, she would navigate the fallout, but lurking in the shadows were whispers. A choice loomed before her, one that would test her commitment and reshape her destiny. As the meeting stretched on, Internal dialogue swirled. Would she forge ahead, risking everything for the truth? Or would the whispers of doubt prevail, paralyzing her with the spectre of loss? This was a pivotal turn in her journey, one that felt like an awakening long suppressed. The question now clawed at her. Could she truly stand up to the powerful, and how could she shield her allies without losing herself in the process? The room buzzed with muted conversations, conspiratorial glances exchanged. Little did they know, the next board meeting would test the very limits of their corporate ethics. There would be no turning back now. Days turned into weeks following that pivotal board meeting, yet for Jessica, the whirlwind had only just begun. The executives, though rattled, made it clear that her boldness would not go unchallenged. Rumors of potential consequences buzzed around the office like wildfire, and the time to prepare had become her most esteemed ally. But a shift had occurred within her. No longer just an employee churning beneath the weight of corporate hierarchy, Jessica had become a beacon for others. Her commitment ignited a ripple of solidarity. Each colleague who silently nodded in agreement and expressed their frustrations in quiet corners multiplied into an informal coalition of support. Together, they stoked the flames of courage, each voice amplifying the other's resolve. The air crackled with anticipation as Jessica gathered her cohort in a small conference room. She looked around, met their eyes, and felt a surge of pride. These were not just colleagues, they were fellow warriors, each deserving of recognition and opportunity, a remnant of what corporate culture blindly strove to neglect. "We have a voice now," she started, her voice steady and commanding. "It's time we leverage that for meaningful change. We owe each other that much." Sarah, absent from the last meeting, spoke up with conviction. "We can't cave to the fear tactics. Let's prepare a report crystallizing our findings so we can approach upper management again, this time united." A chorus of agreements surrounded her, a powerful reminder of the metamorphosis taking place. Weeks of arduous effort blended collaborative research and consolidated voices. They meticulously drafted personal accounts, coupled with documented data, intertwining them into a narrative that showcased both the human experience and the corporate failures derived from complacency. This wasn't merely a bulletin, it was a calling card for transformation. The date for their collective confrontation loomed as they prepared to present to upper management again. Jessica's mind swirled with emotions. Acceptance or dismissal hung heavy in the balance. Their efforts could either galvanize change or serve as a platform for stringent consequences. The meeting arrived, and this time Jessica felt a resolute calm wash over her, sharpened by the collective intention radiating from her allies. They entered the boardroom as a coalition, no longer isolated, but a fortified front. Spurred on by the strength of her peers, Jessica stepped forward to present their findings. "Today, we stand before you not just as employees, but as advocates for a more inclusive corporate environment," she began, fully channeling the gravitas of the moment. The initial skepticism from the board members was palpable, each gaze firmly planted on their stoic leader. Uncertainty clouded their expressions. She felt the tension in the room shift, a rhythmic pulse of discomfort merging with intrigue as she iterated the numbers accentuated by the heart-wrenching stories shared. As she conveyed the collective desire for transparency, a subtle energy coursed through the room. A movement was bubbling just beneath the surface. Change was no longer merely an idea, it was a pressing necessity. As she concluded, a knot tightened in her stomach as the board members shared a charged silence, weighing her words carefully. The chair cleared his throat, the tension palpable. "Jessica, your passion is commendable, but implementing systemic changes requires time and significant resources. We need to balance our operational efficiencies with compassion." With each word, Jessica felt empowered, yet remained acutely aware of the task ahead. "Respectfully, it doesn't have to be binary. We can prioritize both. Let's establish what policies can be reformed immediately, and which long-term goals we can commit to. We don't need to wait for a crisis to create change. We can initiate it right now. The board relented, discussions igniting surrounding the proposals Jessica had outlined. Strikingly, Jessica noticed the executives beginning to nod, tiny, almost imperceptible gestures of reluctant acceptance. Perhaps this conversation held promise. When the meeting concluded, it became evident the road ahead would not be without hurdles. Yet for the first time, Jessica felt emboldened by a clear path. An internal review board was formed, tasked with analyzing their findings and ensuring that pathways for accountability were established. As she left the boardroom, her heart raced with exhilaration. She could feel the transformation beneath her skin, the metamorphosis of a woman who once felt confined to the shadows, now stepping boldly into her power. She didn't just represent herself. She'd become an engine of change for many who silently waited for this very moment. "I couldn't have done this without you all," Jessica acknowledged when they gathered later to celebrate their small victory. Those words, laden with gratitude and connection, surged among her group, solidifying a bond that transcended the corporate framework they had fought against. Through the turmoil, Jessica achieved the personal growth she had desperately sought. She was no longer defined by fear, but rather by her invaluable contributions. The challenges she had once perceived as obstacles now surfaced as opportunities for collaboration and understanding. Each person she supported bore into her spirit, a testament to the undeniable strength resonating within them. As they shared laughter and reflection that evening, Jessica's heart brimmed with hope for the future. The journey ahead may remain convoluted, but she was resolute in her determination, a force galvanizing change not only for herself, but for all those waiting in the wings, ready to shed the suffocating silence together. This moment of victory was solidified with a promise to continue advocating for those who felt voiceless, for every entry-level employee yearning for acknowledgement, every overlooked individual deserving a chance to thrive. The sun dipped below the horizon as they left, leaving an indelible mark on something grander than themselves, forever changed, forever empowered. Their fight for justice had only just begun. Now I urge you, subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It really makes a difference. Comment below your reactions and theories about the ending, and don't wait even one more second to share. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. The true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.